Hey, what is up guys? Today I just wanted to go over some of the changes and additions that I'd like to see made to the settlement system if it ends up being put in the next Elder Scrolls game. And for the sake of time, I'll go ahead and split this video into somewhat of a two-part series with 5 main points each, just so that the videos don't end up being too long and cumbersome. So speaking of changes, I think the first one that should be made is keeping the settlement system completely separate from the main story and most quests in general. This may come as a surprise to some of you because I really enjoy building, but there was nothing I hated more than having to use the settlement system during a part of the story. For example, when you have to build the teleportation device to get to the Institute, or even just doing all of Dima's memory sequences during the Far Harbor storyline. I'd have to say, if it weren't for the interesting backstory the player receives after finishing the sequences, I'm not sure I would have bothered completing them. To me, both examples felt really out of place among the story, and I imagine they must have been even more boring to watch as a viewer, which is really something I hate to see. When it comes to an Elder Scrolls game, or even a Fallout game for that matter, I don't think the player should ever feel forced to do something. Now, I think a lot of us can admit that that was not the case in Fallout 4. Lucky for me, I didn't run into this too much because I realized the settlement missions were very redundant early on, but I would always hear about how Preston Garvey would constantly nag the player to go help settlements to the point where it was considered pretty damn annoying. So please, Bethesda, if you're gonna have settlements tied to missions, at least try and make them interesting, emotional, and, at the very least, unique. If they could pull that off, then I'd be more than happy to see one of Preston's ancestors being thrown in the game as somewhat of an Easter egg. I don't know, maybe they could end up having him be a lone Redguard by the name of Prestonius Garvius, or something along those lines. Also, with unique settlements in mind, let's go ahead and talk about variety. And just to clarify, I really am okay with settlements having quests, especially to acquire them in the first place. I just don't think the building mode should be a part of that aspect. But anyways, when it comes to the variety of settlements, I think it also applies to the type of locations that they're available to build on, and the objects you have to build with. It's important that we have a lot more than just wood to use. Having other materials such as stone, brick, or even the ability to make orcish and bandit-style camps would be really great. Trying to do this in a way that would allow players to mix and match materials, yet still have it come together in the end, would no doubt be a huge challenge for Bethesda, but doing so would also add some much-needed variety and substance to the settlement system as a whole. Now, there are a lot more specific details regarding the variety, which we'll get into later on. But as a final, more general note for this category, I thought we'd go over something Fallout 4 did right when it came to the settlements. And that was the unique locations that players were given to start settlements in. You had farmland, small towns, an island, areas of the city, and the list really does go on, to the point where my only complaint would be that there wasn't much change in elevation. I thought for the most part all the settlements felt rather flat, which may have actually been for the best, though I wouldn't mind seeing areas to build that are high up in the mountains or deep in wooded canyons when it comes to the Elder Scrolls. Fallout 4 settlements were also pretty diverse in terms of their residents as well, with places being run solely by ghouls or robots. However, I would love seeing this improved upon even further, especially given the vast amount of races that the Elder Scrolls series offers. Next up is more of a minor complaint, but may even be a necessary one when it comes to making defending settlements a bit more interesting. As of now, raiders seem to spawn in out of nowhere, right outside the settlement limits, and oftentimes when you're halfway across the map too. Not only is this unrealistic and unimmersive, but I've never found them to be much of a challenge either. I would have to suggest having bandits spawn a ways down the road with maybe some kind of a war horn that they would blow, as they march in, and that could take the place of the alarm system that Fallout 4 offers at the moment. I also think it would make it more intense if they came in waves and in bigger numbers, thus making battles last longer rather than just being short skirmishes. The enemies that attack you in your settlements should also be very diverse as well. I would love to see a group of bandits ride up on settlements with trolls or wolves tied up that they could send in. For comparison, just imagine the feeling you would have gotten if raiders all of a sudden brought in a super mutant behemoth that they had chained up to attack your settlement in Fallout 4. And although I must admit some kind of siege system with war machines would be cool too, I also feel that it could end up being a bit much and might even end up taking away from the story or other elements that the game needs to offer. So I'll leave it at that for now in terms of defending settlements. For this next topic, I didn't think much of it until a buddy mentioned it, and that's having more immersive settlers. As soon as he brought it up, I began to realize how much I hated interacting with settlers in Fallout 4. Very few of them had any sort of backstory or interesting tales about what they had been doing while I was away. There were, of course, the named settlers that you could find in places such as Grey Garden or the Slog, but even they were far too few to make a difference. In the Elder Scrolls, I would be grateful to see common settlers given backstories that they could share with the player or other NPCs for that matter, because how often do settlers realistically move about the settlement or interact with other NPCs? In my case, it was hardly ever. So for the Elder Scrolls, having settlers do jobs like chopping wood, mining, or farming is great, but I also wouldn't mind them being able to take a break for once to play some cards with another settler, or even just drink some mead and talk to a friend. Now, last but not least is resources. Trust me, I know it sounds boring, but this is one aspect of the settlement system that I think will most likely end up changing more than anything else, just so that it really fits in with what the Elder Scrolls has to offer. Especially if Bethesda doesn't plan on adding junk to collect all over Tamriel, which personally I'm 100% okay with. But here are a few alternatives. First and foremost would be buyable supplies, and these could be bought from nearby towns or traveling merchants. Having a raven you could send out from each settlement to order supplies would also be an interesting concept. And I hope out of all the methods of acquiring supplies, these would be some of the more expensive. And with that being said, another way to earn resources could be through labor, either carried out by the player or settlers in tasks such as mining or working the sawmill. And it would be really neat if settlers increased their efficiency and got better at them, similar to Fallout Shelter. Doing it this way might be a bit slower than just buying the materials, but would also be a lot cheaper as to balance everything out. So all that being said, I think that's going to do it for today. I know it wasn't too terribly long, but I also want to get your guys' feedback between now and part 2. And by the way, just so you're not kept in suspense, in part 2 we'll be covering decorations, more player homes, workers for hire, settlement lore, and also more natural objects. So for those interested, feel free to stick around for that. Otherwise, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought down in the comments. Thanks again for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one.